Hello and welcome to Women in Retail Talks, the podcast where C-suite executive women in the retail space share their stories of professional growth, leadership development, personal journeys, and more. I'm Marie Albajes, Senior Editor of Women in Retail, a membership-based community of executive women at leading retailers and brands. Today I'm joined by Emma Mcilroy, the CEO of WILDFANG. We're talking with Emma about the reasons she founded the gender-fluid apparel company, WILDFANG's sustainability initiatives, and what entrepreneurial lessons she's learned building the business over the last decade. So Emma, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, I'm pumped to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I know we have a lot of ground to cover, and I want to talk about your leadership at WILDFANG, but first I want to hear how you got into retail in the first place, how you came from Northern Ireland to Oregon, and especially your time at Nike. I know that was very influential for you.
Yeah, I'm born and bred in Belfast in Northern Ireland. You can probably hear it in my accent. I went to university in England and then I headed actually into investment banking. So I did that for the first part of my career. And I was not becoming a very nice person. And so I wanted to get back to what I loved. And I didn't see myself doing that for the rest of my life. So I looked around the bank and I found this group of people who worked on sport and sports sponsorship of the Premier League. And, you know, I'm sports obsessed. So that was an area that I wanted to see if I could get into. I got into that team. That led me to, I did a couple of years there, and then that led me to Nike. You know, and I would say the through line in my career, I did another 6 or 7 years for Nike in the US. I would say the through line for me is consumer. I'm a brand marketer. So, you know, I know we're going to talk retail today, but the consumer is at the heart of everything for me. It starts and ends with the consumer, and really my skill set is in understanding the consumer and building a strong emotional connection with that consumer. And so that's what I've always loved to do. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. It doesn't matter what you're selling them. It really just comes down to consumer obsession and consumer understanding for me. So yeah, I did that at Nike, and then I, you know, had the perfect mix of naivety and arrogance to believe I could build my own brand. And so I left Nike to build WILDFANG about 10 years ago. And I've been doing that ever since.
Yeah. And I read that you are a big sports fan and that you were a runner, probably still are a runner. I too was an 800-meter runner. So I feel you on that one. So your love of sports must have really fueled you at Nike, being not only in Oregon, but being at the center of all of that. I mean, tell me a little bit more about what that was like.
Yeah, you know, sports gives you, whether it's individual or team. I played both. I played soccer and field hockey at a pretty high level too. So I would say sports gives you some tools that are really helpful as an entrepreneur. Number one being resilience. You know, the ability to finish that last rep and get back up and somehow get back on the track again, even though you're not sure how. You know, so I'd say that resilience has been unbelievably useful to me in the career choice I've made. I would say the other thing is just hard work, you know, just unbelievable hard work to improve yourself and to get better at something. And pretty much every day I learn something new in this job. And I'm forced to improve and forced to evolve. So, you know, I'm grateful for what sport did for me. In terms of Nike, you know, I'm obviously wildly biased, but as far as I'm concerned, it's the best sports brand in the world. And, you know, potentially the best brand in the world, full stop for me. So I would say there's a lot that's different from what I do now. You know, I run a company that's under 50 million and Nike's a company that's over 50 billion. So, you know, I'd say there's a lot that's different between those two spaces and arenas. But what I would say is similar is Nike taught me to be completely consumer obsessed. That's why I learned my consumer obsession. That's where I learned to really mine consumer insights and get close to a consumer and form a strong emotional connection with the consumer to influence how they think, how they believe, how they behave. I do think Nike's the best in the world at that. So I'm really grateful for my time there, and I'm really grateful for what I learned there.
Yeah, that's great. So tell me about how your consumer obsession led to WILDFANG. Like, what was the problem there that you were trying to solve?
Yeah, so it all started one day I was in the in an Urban Outfitters in Portland, and I was looking for a really great graphic tee, something kind of bold and edgy and that made a statement. And my best friend was looking for a blazer, a really great blazer, and we wandered through the women's section. It was pretty depressing, and nothing was well made. The blazers kind of had fake pockets and fake buttons and poor tailoring. And then all the t-shirts were pretty weak and pretty soft, which is fine. I think that can be part of an assortment, but it was just missing a backbone, missing attitude. And then we wandered into the men's department, and suddenly that was where all the great blazers were and all the great graphic tees were. And so from my perspective, that was just a really interesting revelation as to why we would restrict a great silhouette based on gender. That didn't make sense to me. I understood why fit might be different or size might be different, but it felt very strange that we would restrict an entire group of humans from a great silhouette. And so, that was where WILDFANG was born. And we did over a year's worth of consumer insight work. We did it in our nights and weekends because, as you've established, we had a full-time job at Nike. So we did it in nights and weekends. And what we discovered was, a lot of women like us were missing something from the retail space. They didn't feel like they had a home in retail. They felt like there were a lot of places selling things to them and pushing things at them, and a lot of people who had big assortments and heavy discounts, but they didn't really feel like there was anyone who got them and a place that they could call home. And so when we created WILDFANG, that's what we wanted to solve for. With that consumer insight work, we wanted to offer up the silhouettes that they felt they were missing, these more menswear inspired units and styles, and then we wanted to do it in an attitude that connected with them and they felt inspired by. And we felt like if we could combine those two propositions, we would give them their new retail home. And I think, for a large several 100,000 humans on this planet, I think that we've done that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've heard you say that you neither like shopping nor do you like fashion, and it was really about this drive for self-expression for you. Can you talk a little bit more about how that kind of fueled your first couple of years as you're working to build the brand?
Yeah, I'm not particularly fashionable. I can pull myself off as fashionable because of the tips and tricks that I've learned, but I'm not a big fashionista, and I've never claimed to be. And I've always found a particularly exclusive place, an exclusive club. It's a little bit like, high-end wine or high-end art. Always felt slightly exclusive, and that felt weird and wrong because every single one of us puts stuff on our body every day, and I think each of us has the permission to feel proud of who we are through how we express ourselves. I think that's honestly a pretty core and basic human right, is to be proud of how you show up in the world. And so, we wanted to kind of break down all that exclusivity. We wanted to mess with all those rules and say, show up exactly how you want to show up, and that can change. That can change from morning to night. That can change from day to day. That can change from year to year, where you're at in your own personal growth. But at WILDFANG, we say that we love to celebrate your masculine, your feminine, and everything in between. And that's true. Whatever box society has created for you, or your family has created for you, or your workplace has created for you, we like to smash that box and give you the tools to show up anywhere you want on the gender expression spectrum.
Yeah. Well, and how does that work when it comes to production and textiles? I mean, you're right. There are these boxes that clothes fit in typically with the smaller pockets and the buttons and all of that. So what were there challenges to kind of saying, to hell with these clothes that have to fit in a certain gender box? And how was that received?
Yeah, I mean, we obsess. So if you spend any time in fast fashion, one of the reasons why it's so fast is very rarely does fast fashion fit on anyone. They don't do any fit testing. At WILDFANG, we have between 3 and 4 rounds of fit testing on every single garment that goes on the website. And so what we do with that is we fit it on a wide range of body types, what we call fit models. So bodies that have been determined to be representative of a wide spread of the population. But then what we do in our final fit testing is we put it on, inverted commas, real people, right? People off the street, anyone in our networks, we invite to come in and try it on just to see how outside of those fit models it fits. And we do that on a wide range of gender identities. And we do that on a wide range of sizes. I'm delighted to say our sizing goes from a double XS up to a 4X now. And so, yeah, that fit testing is critical when we talk about the product creation process. So much of it is about that fit process, and then also styling. Not every single silhouette looks great on every single body type. And so it's about working with stylists and models to find what looks great on different body types, but not to be restricted by those norms that have been handed down to us by prior generations. There's absolutely no reason that someone who identifies as a man shouldn't wear a dress, right? And in fact, in the last 18 months, I would say two of the biggest fashion moments were Robert Pattinson wearing a skirt to the Dior runway, and then Brad Pitt wearing a skirt to Bullet Train premiere, right? And so there's no reason why those things should not be okay. Now, does every single person look and feel great in a skirt? No, and that's where the fit comes in. That's where the styling comes in, to make sure people feel comfortable and empowered. But there's certainly no reason from a gender perspective that can't be true.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, you're breaking these norms, right? The norms of gender, the norms of fit, the norms of how you're producing these items. And another norm that I think you're breaking, or at least have been in the last couple of years, is the sustainability initiatives that WILDFANG has had. I mean, you guys, as of August 2022, became climate neutral certified. So walk us through a little bit about why that's important and what you had to do to get there.
Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing it up, because I'm so proud of the fact that we are climate neutral. Actually, to be perfectly honest with you, one of the reasons that we're climate neutral is because we're not sustainability experts. And I think that's a really important thing to say on the podcast, because I'm sure there's a ton of sustainability experts listening to this. When you work in our industry, the best thing to do for the planet, if you care about the planet, and we care deeply about the planet, the best thing to do is stop doing business. That's your number one choice. And then if you choose to continue to keep doing business, climate neutral is kind of your second best bet. And so what you're really saying there is, we actually don't know how. We're not the number one player in the world when it comes to making sustainable garments. But what we do want to do is offset our impact. And so what we do is we work with the climate neutral organization to calculate our impact. And that takes months. That takes a long time to figure out our shipping, our manufacturing, our office electricity, like all the different parts of our organization. How much impact do we create? How much negative impact do we create from a carbon perspective? We calculate that. And then we do two things. One is we work with climate neutral to create a plan to reduce that. So it's not just as simple as kind of writing a check for some credits. We actually have to produce a 3-year plan that says, here's how we will reduce our carbon impact on the planet every year. So that's step one. And then step two is we work with a specialist to buy carbon credits to offset our impact so that our business becomes climate neutral. And so, for a small organization, I think sometimes people think WILDFANG's bigger than it is. There's only 20 something people in our team. That's a big undertaking to do all those calculations and to do all the offsetting. But I think for me, it's kind of minimum viable for dealing with this consumer group, and frankly, for being able to go to bed and sleep at night if you're in the fashion industry. I think we do create such a massive problem. I think you see in the Atacama Desert and other places, you see the output of fast fashion and what we're doing to the planet. And so, yeah, for me, it's minimum viable, but I am deeply proud of that work as part of our overall CSR strategy.
Yeah, that's great. So let me ask you this. It sounds like a lot of what drives you and what drives the company is your passion for things like self-expression and thwarting gender norms and getting that climate neutral certification. when you're, and you mentioned that your team is 20 something people, when you're looking for your next hire or when you're looking for your next promotion, I imagine that you're looking for people who have that same drive, that same passion. How are you kind of filtering out when you're interviewing or when you're deciding on a promotion? How are you really looking at your employees to see if they do have that same drive and that same passion?
Yeah, one of the things that makes you really successful at WildFang is having a chip on your shoulder. It actually tends to be one of the things that we interview for, because most of us at some point were told we couldn't. We were told we couldn't be a mom. We were told we couldn't be a CEO. We were told, we couldn't, we wouldn't make the varsity team, and people who tend to do really well in an organization are people who've been told they couldn't or been told no, and they've overcome that in some way. So that is a little bit of a sneaky behind the scenes in terms of one of the things that we look for, is people who have a chip on their shoulder and have something to prove, because that's a force to be reckoned with. Someone who is on a mission to prove themselves. In terms of internally, and promotions and stuff like that. Touch wood, I'm deeply proud of the culture that we have at WildFang and the team that we have at WildFang. And it's an incredibly committed group of individuals. And we do have both great diversity internally and great retention. I would say that one thing I'm deeply passionate about is being people centric. And what I mean by that is not brand centric. There will come a time when you shouldn't work at WildFang anymore. And that's okay. And I talk openly to my employees about what that time is for them, because life is long and the world's a big place. And if I can help them find a job somewhere else that allows them to hit their next stage of growth, that's great. That's great for everybody, because who knows, maybe they come back in 2 jobs time into a senior leadership position with us, or in the meantime, maybe they just go and tell everybody in their new job how much they loved their last job and how great their boss was because they helped them get this new job, right? And so for me, my goal is not to keep you at WildFang forever and ever and ever. My goal is to keep you at WildFang while you're really happy and while I can continue to offer you growth and opportunity. And when one of those two things breaks down, it's right that you go somewhere else, and I will absolutely help you do that. And that tends to be how I lead and how my team leads. So yeah, I think if it's right for people to get promotion and stay and we can still offer them the growth that they need, great. And if it's not, then we will do everything we can to find them that growth at one of our friends or in our broader network.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so refreshing. I mean, we talk all the time about how businesses and companies are always saying that your job is like your family, the company is your family, but they aren't the same thing. A family can't fire you at will like a company can. So having a leader that is transparent about, this isn't personal either way. And here I am as a leader telling you that I completely understand that this job is not your entire life and that there will be other jobs in the future. It's probably something that the people reporting to you are seeing and then mirroring themselves to their reports. So I'm really glad to hear you say that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I continue to find myself surprised by people who leave our company. And I will tell you, if you survive in startup, you usually go on to even bigger and better things somewhere else. So WildFang is usually a stepping stone rather than an ending for you. And so that both gives me joy, and it also, frankly, opens up future opportunities for our business. If you go on to a big job at an agency or a big job at another company, that may spur a partnership or an improved service rate, right? But yeah, you can't keep anyone anywhere that they don't want to be, certainly not for very long. So we do try to be people centric in the way that we come at that.
Yeah. And speaking of, do you still consider WildFang a startup? Like, at what point does it switch in your brain?
Startup for me is not about time. It's not about how long you do it. We're 10 years in. However, I will say COVID kind of ripped 2 years away from us in terms of our plans. But for me, startup equals rate of growth. We do have a high rate of growth. It equals instability, I'm going to call it, which is maybe a negative word, but just pace of change, level of change in the business model, level of change in the team, level of change in process and operations, and I think we're still in the stage where there's a pretty high rate of change. So those are kind of the two for me that say, we're not yet over the startup phase. It's less about the amount of time, and it's more about the stability within the business and then the rate of growth expected from the business.
Mm-hmm. Any major initiatives that you're excited about that are either current or upcoming at WILDFANG?
Well, last week, the WILDFANG team broke the Guinness World Record for the longest ever drag show, and raised $306,000 for the Trevor Project. So I'm unbelievably proud of that. Yeah, I don't know how many retail brands out there have a Guinness World Record, but that was in response when we saw just since January, between January and the end of April, there were over 400 pieces of anti-LGBTQ legislation introduced across the US. And I think the trend has continued both at a local and national level and at a Supreme Court level. And so we felt it particularly important to make our views clear, but also to find a way to bring the community together in a moment of unity and celebration. And so we did that last week, which is why I sound like I do right now and why we are all absolutely exhausted. But yeah, we produced a 48-hour continuous nonstop drag show. We had over 60 queens, over 60 MCs, including Cheryl Strait and Fred Armisen and Portugal the Man and Stacey London and just tons of other amazing folks involved. And yeah, we raised $306,000 for the Trevor Project, which will go into the amazing work that they do for queer youth. So pretty proud of that, and hope that the ripple effects of that continue to spread positivity throughout our community. And then we have our fall campaign coming up that launches in early August. We'll be launching 3 new silhouettes of button-ups, which we believe are pretty innovative in the industry. I can't tell you too much about them, but there's 3 new styles. Button-ups are our biggest franchise. It's a huge part of our revenue, and we have 3 entirely new styles that we're launching, and we are also launching them with a familiar face in our new campaign. So that'll be a lot of fun, and that comes out in 2 weeks. And someone I've wanted to work with for a little while. She is a phenomenal comedian, and very much a rising star in comedy. So pretty excited to work with her. And then this week, actually tomorrow, we launch on July 18th, we launch our collaboration with Together. Together is a sports media company founded by Chloe Kim and Alex Morgan, Sue Bird. And so we have a football jersey that we are launching together, which we're really excited about. We think it's the perfect intersection between sport and fashion. And we think this summer is a great time to be wearing that silhouette. So you're going to see a lot of fun stuff over the next 2 to 4 weeks around that jersey. So yeah, some fun partnerships, some dope events, and then a new campaign with some amazing new styles.
Yeah. I was going to say, back to the drag show. I mean, this is a perfect example of a brand that's not just, putting a rainbow flag on their social media and putting out a tagline for Pride Month. Like, this is you and the brand actually living out the values and including your audience and your shoppers and your consumers in that. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that, and we'll put a link to it in the show notes as well.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I think we're coming into a truly fascinating time as retail leaders. I think it's been a long time since we've been faced with anything like this, where there's a clear commercial opportunity to be made, and I think folks have focused on that for a while with the LGBTQ community and with Pride, but we're seeing an immense fracture and a lot of divisiveness, and that is affecting bottom line, and that is affecting profits, and so it's going to be really interesting to see how public companies and larger companies react to that. From my perspective, I'm really clear on where we stand, and we'll always stand for the queer community and for a more inclusive world and a more diverse world. But I do think, given what's happened with some of the big players in the last few months, I think it's going to be really, really interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, and it's so good to know that like that's you are steadfast in that your values are these and they will never change. So I think that is a great place to end. I have a million more questions, but I know we're out of time. I'm really excited to see some of the initiatives that you mentioned this year and next for WILDFANG. And I really enjoyed our conversation, Emma. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. For more information on this podcast, please go to womeninretail.com/podcasts for show notes. Women in Retail Talks is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. Make sure to subscribe on our podcast channel page as well. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a few moments to rate and review our show. Lastly, if you're a female retail leader interested in joining our community at Women in Retail Leadership Circle, visit womeninretail.com/apply. Thanks, and until next time, this has been Women in Retail Talks.